If the person you love humiliates you in front of 1,000 strangers, but none of them know the truth about your secret, who is really the fool? The one who mocks, or the one with something to protect? They say the cruelest wounds are the ones you never see coming. For Emma Harper, that wound arrived tonight, in a ballroom that glittered with diamonds, laughter, and the whispered cruelties of the rich and powerful. The chandeliers sparkled like icicles above her, casting fractured light over her trembling hands and the pressed linen of her borrowed gown. But no amount of glamour could hide the chill in the air as she heard her ex-husband's laughter, sharp and cold, slicing through the room. It was supposed to be a night of celebration. The city's elite had gathered at the annual Silver Hearts Charity Gala, a dazzling event held at the Grand Regent Hotel, where tuxedos and ball gowns swept across marble floors and champagne flowed like water. Emma, invited by a friend, had hoped to blend in quietly, to breathe for one night without the shadow of heartbreak. She hadn't expected Ben Kingston, her ex-husband, to be here, let alone to be the center of attention, holding court with his new girlfriend on his arm. She first noticed him when a ripple of laughter broke out near the bar. Ben always did love a crowd. He looked even more self-assured than he did during their marriage. Jawline sharp, suit tailored to perfection, his arm looped easily around the waist of a woman who seemed born for the red carpet. Emma's heart hammered in her chest as Ben caught sight of her and deliberately raised his glass in a mocking toast. "Hey everyone," he called, not bothering to lower his voice. "Looks like someone's been enjoying the post-divorce buffet." His girlfriend stifled a giggle, and the group around them tittered, eager to be part of the joke. Emma felt a burning flush spread from her chest to her cheeks. She wanted to shrink, to disappear, to become invisible in a room where invisibility seemed impossible. She tried to turn away, to ignore them, but Ben wasn't finished. "Seriously, Em, you should try a salad. You used to care about your figure." His words echoed louder than the string quartet playing near the dance floor. She could feel dozens of eyes turning toward her, glancing up and down, cataloging every pound, every curve that hadn't been there a year ago. The room suddenly felt too small, too bright, too loud. Emma gripped her glass, the water inside trembling as much as her hand. The shame was suffocating, a choking, heavy weight pressing down on her ribs. The night she had hoped would be a break from pain had become a stage for her ex-husband's humiliation, performed for an audience of Manhattan's finest. She could almost hear the whispers. "Is that Ben Kingston's ex-wife? She's gained so much weight. Wasn't she a yoga instructor? What happened to her?" Each comment was a little cut, a little more proof that her life was spiraling out of her control. Emma thought she'd known humiliation before. The day Ben asked for a divorce had gutted her, but it was private. A cold, bitter ending in the living room of the apartment they once called home. This was different. This was public execution by gossip, by laughter, by the casual cruelty of people who had never known real loss. She wanted to scream, she wanted to run, but most of all, she wanted to hide. Her body, a body she'd once been proud of, had become the focus of ridicule. She pressed a hand to her stomach, feeling the slight but unmistakable swell beneath the fabric. She was only a few months along, but her shape had already changed, and she'd done everything she could to hide it. What Ben and everyone else didn't know was that her weight gain wasn't laziness or neglect. It was life. It was hope. It was the future growing inside her, a secret she had guarded fiercely, even as her world collapsed. As Ben turned away, satisfied with his performance, Emma's vision blurred with unshed tears. She clenched her jaw, willing herself not to cry, not to break in front of them. She would not give him, or anyone, the satisfaction of seeing her crumble. A waiter passed by, offering canapés she had no appetite for. Emma shook her head, focusing on the golden details of the ballroom, on anything but Ben's laughter echoing behind her. She spotted her friend Megan across the room, her eyes wide with concern, but Emma couldn't move, couldn't risk a scene. She was rooted to the spot, alone in a crowd of 1,000 people. She wondered if this was it, if this was what her life would be now. The ex-wife, the punchline, the object of pity and scorn. She tried to summon anger, but all she felt was tired, so unbearably tired of pretending she was okay, of holding herself together with nothing but stubbornness and hope. But even as her heart broke, something deep inside her refused to die. She wasn't just a discarded wife, or a failed yoga instructor, or a woman who'd let herself go. She was still Emma Harper. She was still alive. And she still had a secret, one that none of them could imagine, because the child she carried wasn't Ben's. And when the truth came out, when the world discovered who the father really was, every single person in this glittering, heartless room would see Emma Harper in a whole new light. But for now, she endured. She breathed. She held her ground. And as the music swelled and the laughter faded, she made herself a promise. This was not the end of her story. It was just the beginning. Emma Harper was 32 years old. But tonight, standing in the shimmering chaos of the Silver Hearts Gala, she felt at least a decade older. If you'd met her just a year ago, you'd have seen a different woman. Back then, Emma was the kind of person everyone wanted around. Energetic, warm, always ready with a smile. She taught sunrise yoga at a small studio on the Lower East Side, ran workshops in the park, and filled her weekends with laughter, brunches, and volunteer work at the animal shelter. People called her the soul of sunshine. And it was true. Emma's life sparkled, even when her marriage with Ben was far from perfect. Growing up in a working-class family in rural Pennsylvania, Emma never took anything for granted. Her father was a mechanic, her mother cleaned houses, and Emma learned early that love and hard work were the only real currency that mattered. Scholarships and part-time jobs had carried her through college. She moved to New York with nothing but a duffel bag and big dreams, determined to build a life on her own terms. She didn't care about money, status, or fancy parties. She wanted something real. A life with meaning. Meeting Ben Kingston had seemed like fate. He was her opposite in every way. Polished, confident, born to a family with generational wealth. He swept her off her feet with big gestures and promises of adventure. At first, it was like a movie. The whirlwind romance, the sunset proposal, the wedding in Central Park. Emma believed she'd finally found a forever home, a family of her own. She wanted children, laughter, and a safe harbor from the storms she'd known all her life. But marriage to Ben was not a fairy tale. The first cracks appeared quietly. Late nights at the office, canceled plans, a growing sense of distance she couldn't bridge. Still, Emma clung to hope, pouring love into their home and her work, trying to ignore the chill that crept in every time Ben glanced at her with that empty look. By the third year, the distance was a canyon. By the fourth, it was a different kind of loneliness, the kind that whispers, "You're no longer enough." And then came the divorce. It happened fast. A few angry words, papers on the table, Ben's cold signature on the dotted line. He never fought for her. He never tried to fix what was broken. He just moved on, as if their years together were a minor detour in his life's perfect plan. For Emma, the divorce wasn't just the loss of a husband. It was the loss of a dream she'd spent years building brick by brick. The months that followed were some of the hardest of her life. Emma lost her apartment. She lost clients at her yoga studio, people who suddenly took sides or felt awkward about the drama. She cut back on everything: groceries, hobbies, even her morning lattes. She moved into a tiny sublet, sold her favorite bike, and watched her world shrink to the barest essentials. Each day felt like survival. Each night felt like a battle against regret. And yet, despite everything, Emma survived. She took extra classes, cleaned Airbnbs, worked as a dog walker and personal trainer. Anything to keep going. She refused to let bitterness define her. She refused to become a victim, even as she felt the weight of loneliness pressing down on her. She still visited her parents every month, still called her best friend Megan for hours when the walls closed in, still sent postcards to her old yoga students with handwritten notes of encouragement. Emma might have been broke, but she was not broken. What almost no one knew, what even Megan only suspected, was that Emma had a heart that could not give up. Every hardship, every disappointment had carved her into someone stronger. There were days she'd sob in the shower, exhausted and afraid, but she never stopped moving. She had inherited her mother's grit and her father's stubbornness. Even as her life collapsed around her, she dreamed of building again. But it wasn't just hardship that changed her. It was a secret. It was the morning she woke up feeling dizzy, reached for a pregnancy test almost out of habit, and saw the faint pink lines that would change everything. At first, she thought it was a mistake. She sat on the bathroom floor, staring at the test, her mind whirling with questions and doubts. She'd always wanted to be a mother, but she'd never pictured it happening this way. Alone, scared, with nothing but hope and a beating heart inside her. Emma kept her secret close. She didn't tell Ben. She knew what he'd say, how he'd react. He'd made it clear he didn't want children. He wanted a perfect life, free of mess and complication. So Emma hid her pregnancy, working harder, eating better, trying to shield herself and her unborn child from the chaos of the world. She talked to her baby late at night, promising to be strong, to keep them both safe, no matter what. Emma's body changed. Her face grew rounder, her hips softer, her energy drained by morning sickness and stress. She watched herself in the mirror, sometimes horrified by the changes, sometimes amazed by the miracle growing inside her. She wore baggy sweaters, avoided parties, and kept her life as quiet as possible. Every day she whispered to her unborn child, "I love you. I will not fail you. We will get through this." Now, standing under the chandeliers at the gala, Emma felt all those memories swirl inside her. The pain, the love, the loss, and the hope. She straightened her shoulders, trying to remember who she was before Ben, before heartbreak. She was Emma Harper, survivor, fighter, mother-to-be. She didn't have money, or power, or even a home she could call her own. But she had something no one could take away. She had heart. And in this city full of sharks, sometimes heart was the most dangerous thing you could possess. The Grand Regent Hotel was the kind of place people only saw in movies. Its marble entryway stretched beneath a canopy of gold-embroidered silk, the doors guarded by uniformed doormen who nodded with silent, practiced respect. For one night every year, the hotel transformed into the beating heart of New York's social world. The Silver Hearts Charity Gala was the ticket, where fortunes were flaunted, alliances forged, and careers made or destroyed by a single careless word. Emma had never belonged in this world. As she passed through the revolving doors, she felt the old reflexes kick in. Keep your head high, shoulders back, act like you belong. But it was impossible not to notice the differences. The women glided across the lobby on impossibly tall heels, their dresses custom-made and their jewelry sparkling under the crystal lights. The men stood in tight clusters, sipping whiskey and talking in low, authoritative voices about hedge funds, art collections, and private jets. For most guests, tonight was a game. They played their parts flawlessly. Every laugh, every compliment, every lingering glance was calculated. Secrets changed hands as easily as business cards. It was a circus of luxury, and the ringmaster was always money. Emma scanned the room, hoping to find her friend Megan. She spotted her near the silent auction tables, deep in conversation with a couple of young tech entrepreneurs. Megan, petite and fierce, wore a fire-red dress and the kind of confidence Emma could only fake. She waved when she saw Emma, offering a look that said, "You've got this," before turning back to her companions. Emma hovered at the edge of the crowd, her heart racing. She wondered if anyone could see through her careful armor. The dress she wore, a navy gown borrowed from Megan, was a size too big and pinned in the back with a safety pin. Her makeup, done at home with trembling hands, barely covered the fatigue in her eyes. But her secret, the growing swell of her belly, remained hidden beneath the flowing fabric. The ballroom itself was stunning. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city skyline, the lights outside shimmering like 1,000 fireflies. Round tables gleamed with silverware, each one crowned by a centerpiece of white peonies and flickering candles. Waiters glided between guests with practiced grace, balancing trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres. At the center of it all stood Ben Kingston. He was in his element, relaxed, powerful, surrounded by admirers. Emma tried not to stare, but it was impossible. He laughed too loudly, held his new girlfriend too tightly, and basked in the attention as if the entire night was a celebration of him. His girlfriend Jasmine, young, beautiful, with movie star hair and an attitude to match, looked like she'd been poured into her dress by a team of stylists. They made a picture-perfect couple, and Emma felt her insides twist. Emma found her seat near the back, next to strangers who barely glanced at her. She listened as the MC announced auction lots, private yacht weekends, jewelry, a dinner with the mayor. Each item sold for more than Emma made in a year. She clapped politely, sipped her sparkling water, and tried to will the evening to move faster. She couldn't help but overhear bits of conversation. Two women behind her, dripping in diamonds, gossiped about old money and new scandals. A hedge fund manager loudly bragged about his latest acquisition, while his wife scrolled through her phone, bored. At the next table, a local news anchor grinned for selfies with fans, her laughter as rehearsed as her evening broadcasts. Emma felt invisible and exposed all at once. She was an outsider in a world that thrived on exclusivity. Every detail of the night was designed to remind people like her just how far they stood from real power. Even the air smelled expensive, a blend of French perfume and the crisp bite of chilled champagne. Suddenly, a voice cut through the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention?" The MC, a silver-haired man with a broadcaster's charm, tapped his microphone. "Let's give a warm welcome to our guest of honor this evening, Mr. Benjamin Kingston." The room erupted in applause. Ben strutted to the stage, Jasmine clinging to his arm. He gave a speech full of empty promises about giving back to the community and building a better future. People cheered and toasted him, their faces aglow with admiration. Emma felt a wave of nausea. She excused herself quietly, weaving through the tables toward the lobby. As she reached the hallway, she caught her reflection in a mirror. A woman alone, clinging to the edges of a party that was never meant for her. For a moment she considered leaving. But something inside her, maybe stubbornness, maybe pride, made her stay. She wandered to the hotel terrace, where the noise faded and the air was cool against her skin. The city spread out before her, glittering and infinite. For the first time all night, she allowed herself to breathe. She remembered her childhood, when her mother used to say, "No matter how small you feel, the sky is always yours." Emma looked up at the stars and thought of the baby growing inside her. This was her secret world, a tiny, fierce hope that no amount of money or mockery could steal. When she finally returned to the ballroom, she felt changed. The walls no longer seemed so close, the crowd less intimidating. She wasn't here to win anyone's approval. She was here for herself and for her child. But she had no idea that the night's greatest humiliation was still to come. In the shadows of that grand hotel, a storm was brewing, and Emma Harper was about to be swept right into the eye. For most of Emma's adult life, Ben Kingston had been the center of her universe, for better or for worse. She had loved him with a trust that once seemed unbreakable. But love, she learned, was not always the same as loyalty. And tonight, in the glittering ballroom of the Grand Regent Hotel, she was forced to see her ex-husband for who he really was. Ben was the type of man people gravitated toward, confident, ambitious, a natural-born performer. When Emma first met him, she'd fallen for the magnetic energy that filled any room he entered. In those early days, he'd seemed so different from anyone she'd ever known. Driven but playful, sweet but also wickedly funny. She'd believed every word he said, let herself believe that together they could weather anything. But over time, Ben's charm hardened into something else. The ambition that once inspired her now seemed to consume him. As his career soared, he grew obsessed with status, image, and power. Emma noticed it in the little things at first. His impatience with her friends, the way he brushed off her ideas as cute, his complaints about her simple wardrobe or frugal spending. After their wedding, Ben's need to be admired only intensified. It was never enough to be successful. He needed to be seen as successful, envied, the man at the top of every social ladder. Their marriage was a public project, curated for Instagram and cocktail parties. Emma did her best to keep up, but she could never shake the feeling that she was becoming just another accessory, another checkmark on Ben's long list of accomplishments. Still, she tried to make things work. She thought love meant compromise, and she was willing to bend until she nearly broke. It wasn't just the emotional distance that stung. There were late nights at the office that stretched until morning, unexplained business trips, text messages he guarded with sudden caution. Emma told herself she was being paranoid, that Ben would never betray her like that. But in her gut, she knew something had shifted. The final blow came on a rainy Thursday. Emma had surprised Ben at his office with his favorite coffee, hoping to rekindle a spark. She found his assistant, barely 25, all lashes and lipstick, sitting a little too close, their laughter sharp and private. Ben's smile faltered when he saw Emma, but he recovered fast, brushing off her visit as sweet but unnecessary. That night, he never came home. The next morning, he asked for a divorce. He moved on at a shocking speed. Within weeks, Ben was posting photos with Jasmine, the same woman from his office, on exotic vacations and at rooftop parties. Emma tried to ignore the headlines, but everywhere she turned, there they were, laughing, beautiful, unburdened by the past. Ben seemed to revel in his new life, using every opportunity to remind the world, and Emma, how much better off he was without her. Tonight, Ben was in his element. He wore a midnight blue tuxedo that matched his eyes, his hair perfectly styled, his smile even sharper than Emma remembered. At his side, Jasmine sparkled in a silver gown, her beauty designed to be noticed. She clung to Ben, but it was clear he loved the attention most of all, the whispered envy of other men, the admiring glances from women. Together, they were the kind of couple who looked like they belonged in magazine spreads, not real life. Emma watched as Ben held court at the center of the ballroom, a glass of champagne in hand, telling stories that made everyone around him laugh. It was a carefully choreographed performance, but only Emma recognized the cracks beneath the surface, the insecurity, the relentless hunger for approval, the subtle digs and jokes that cut a little too deep. As the night wore on, Ben's cruelty became more pronounced. He made jokes about Emma's glow-up, a backhanded way of pointing out her changed appearance. He told anyone who'd listen about how married life had aged him, how he was finally free to live. Jasmine played her part perfectly, laughing at Ben's jokes, leaning in for kisses that were more for the crowd than for him. It wasn't enough to be happy. Ben needed Emma to see how happy he was. He needed her to feel small, forgotten, replaced. Every glance, every laugh, every accidental encounter was part of the show. Emma tried to hold her head high, but the barbs hurt. It was one thing to lose the man you loved. It was another to watch him weaponize your pain for his own entertainment. She gripped her purse so tightly her knuckles turned white, swallowing back tears she refused to let fall. But the real betrayal, the one that truly broke her, was the realization that Ben had never really seen her. To him, she was never a partner, never an equal, never a woman with dreams and fears of her own. She was a symbol, a trophy, a stepping stone. And when she no longer served his ambitions, he discarded her. As she watched Ben parade his new love before the city's elite, Emma felt the old ache in her chest. But beneath the pain was a growing sense of clarity. She saw Ben as he truly was. A man so desperate for validation he'd destroy anything that didn't fit his perfect picture. For the first time, she didn't envy Jasmine, she pitied her. And as the night drew on, Emma realized something else. She didn't want Ben back. She didn't want his world, his spotlight, or his approval. She wanted something real, something true. She wanted a life built on love, not power. She pressed a hand to her stomach, the secret that kept her going, the hope no amount of betrayal could destroy. She whispered to herself, "We're going to be okay." And as Ben laughed in the distance, Emma made herself a quiet promise. She would never let someone like him define her again. Emma Harper always knew New York could be cruel, but nothing had prepared her for the razor-sharp sting of public humiliation, especially when it came at the hands of someone who once promised to love her forever. The gala was reaching its peak. Waiters refilled champagne flutes, the orchestra's music soared, and everywhere around her, the city's elite sparkled under the dazzling lights. But for Emma, the room seemed to shrink with every minute that passed. The pressure built quietly at first, a sense that every conversation paused when she walked by, every laugh was a little too loud, every glance a little too lingering. It felt as if the walls were closing in, the elegant beauty of the ballroom turning suddenly hostile. It started when Jasmine, Ben's new girlfriend, sashayed over to Emma's table. She wore confidence like perfume, every gesture rehearsed for maximum effect. "Oh my gosh, Emma," she drawled, a smile plastered across her flawless face. "I almost didn't recognize you. You look so different." The word hung in the air, heavy with implication. Emma mustered a polite smile, her heart pounding. "Good to see you too, Jasmine." She kept her voice steady, refusing to let the younger woman see the tremor beneath her calm. But Jasmine only leaned in, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Ben says you've been going through a lot. I just wanted to say, I hope you're okay." It's hard, moving on. Emma's cheeks burned, but she refused to bite back. I appreciate your concern, she said quietly, her gaze never wavering. Jasmine smiled, victorious, and glided away to join Ben at the center of the room. The crowd parted for them, their laughter rising as Ben swept Jasmine onto the dance floor, spinning her beneath the lights like the star of her own private show. Then came the moment that would change everything. The MC announced the auction's biggest prize of the night, a week at a private villa in Tuscany, complete with personal chefs, chauffeurs, and a closet full of designer clothes. The bidding was fierce, the crowd buzzing with excitement. Suddenly, Ben, ever the showman, raised his hand and bid an obscene amount, the kind of number that made people gasp and turn in their seats. The spotlight swung toward Ben and Jasmine, bathing them in golden light. Ben stood, grinning, and pulled Jasmine close. "She deserves the world," he declared, loud enough for the entire room to hear. "Unlike some people, she never lets herself go." The words echoed in the ballroom like a gunshot. Silence rippled across the tables. Emma felt the blood drain from her face. Dozens of eyes darted toward her, some with pity, others with barely disguised glee. Someone stifled a laugh. Even Megan, sitting a few tables away, looked stricken, her hands covering her mouth in shock. Emma stared straight ahead, refusing to give Ben the satisfaction of seeing her break. But inside, she was crumbling. The shame pressed down on her, thick and suffocating. She could feel her breath growing shallow, her chest tightening as the humiliation sank in. She wished the ground would open up and swallow her whole. The orchestra faltered, the music stumbling as if even they had been thrown off by Ben's cruelty. For a moment, the entire night teetered on the edge of disaster. Then, as if nothing had happened, the MC laughed awkwardly and ushered the night forward. The crowd forced themselves to recover, the laughter and conversation slowly returning, but nothing felt quite the same. Emma slipped away from her table, making her way through the sea of sequins and silk toward the restroom. The hallway outside was empty, the noise of the party muffled by thick velvet curtains. She leaned against the cool marble wall, her hands shaking as she struggled to catch her breath. Tears threatened, but she blinked them back, furious with herself for caring. She remembered her mother's words, "Never let them see you cry. Tears are private. Dignity is public." Emma straightened, smoothing her dress with trembling hands. She would not let Ben win. Not tonight. Not ever. But as she looked at her reflection in the gilded mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back. Her face was pale, her eyes too bright, her lips pressed into a thin, determined line. She saw the exhaustion, the heartbreak, the years of trying and failing to be enough for a man who never deserved her. She saw a survivor, yes, but also a woman on the edge. She splashed her face with cold water and took a deep breath. "You're okay," she whispered to herself. "You're okay. This is not the end." She thought of the secret she carried, the tiny heartbeat inside her that no one in that glittering room knew about. That, she realized, was her true strength. That was her reason to fight. When she finally returned to the ballroom, the party was in full swing again. But Emma moved through it like a ghost, invisible to all but the most cruel. She kept her chin high, her steps steady, determined not to let her pain become entertainment for others. And yet, beneath the defiance, the wounds ran deep. Public humiliation is a special kind of pain, the kind that lingers long after the night is over. As Emma left the hotel, slipping out into the cold embrace of the city, she felt a heaviness she couldn't shake. She had been broken in front of the people who mattered most to Ben and to herself. But even as she walked away, head bowed against the night, Emma made another promise. She would not let this be the end of her story. The world might have seen her stumble, but they had not seen her rise. And when she returned, stronger, braver, and no longer afraid, every single person who had laughed at her pain would remember her name. Emma Harper moved through the city streets in a blur, her heels echoing against the wet pavement as midnight swallowed the last traces of the gala's golden glow. The freezing spring rain had begun, needling through her thin coat and leaving her hair plastered to her forehead. She barely noticed. Every step away from the Grand Regent Hotel felt like another weight pressing down on her shoulders. She just wanted to vanish, to dissolve into the night so no one would ever see her again. She had never felt so utterly alone. The humiliation of Ben's words rang in her ears, refusing to fade even as she put block after block between herself and the crowd. It wasn't just the public shaming, it was the way people had looked at her, the way Jasmine had smirked, the pity in Megan's eyes. She'd come to the gala hoping to reclaim a piece of herself, maybe even show Ben and his new world that she could survive without him. Instead, she had left more broken than she ever imagined. When Emma finally reached her apartment, a cramped studio in a crumbling walk-up, she locked the door behind her, sinking to the floor with her back pressed against the wood. For a moment, she just sat there, clutching her purse to her chest, staring at the peeling paint and the faint shadows dancing across the ceiling. The silence was deafening, broken only by the sound of her ragged breath. She pulled off her shoes and let them drop to the side, her feet swollen and aching from hours of standing in borrowed heels. Her dress, now wrinkled and damp, felt like a costume for a woman she barely recognized. The night's cruelty replayed in her mind, each word sharper than the last. Unlike some people, she never lets herself go. Ben's voice was a poison she couldn't escape. Emma pressed her face to her knees and finally let the tears come. At first she tried to hold them back, but the dam broke, and she sobbed, huge, shaking sobs that racked her entire body. All the pain she'd bottled up for months spilled out at once. The heartbreak of divorce, the loss of her home, the betrayal by friends who'd picked sides, the constant worry about money, the fear of raising a child alone. It all crashed down on her, wave after wave, until there was nothing left but exhaustion. She cried for herself, but also for the baby she carried, a child who deserved better than this mess, better than a mother who couldn't even stand up for herself at a stupid party. She wept for the future she'd lost, for the woman she'd once been, for all the dreams that now seemed so far out of reach. She wondered if she would ever feel whole again. Eventually the tears dried, leaving Emma empty and numb. She dragged herself to the bathroom, staring at her reflection in the flickering light. Her eyes were red and swollen, her cheeks blotchy. She looked tired, so tired it hurt. She ran the faucet and splashed cold water on her face, trying to wash away the traces of grief. It didn't work. Emma changed into pajamas and crawled into bed, curling around her pillow like it was a lifeline. She wrapped her arms around her stomach, feeling the slight swell beneath her hand. The baby kicked softly, a gentle reminder that she was not truly alone, that she was still needed by someone, even if no one else in the world seemed to care. She tried to sleep, but her mind wouldn't stop racing. What if she wasn't strong enough for this? What if she failed her child, just like she'd failed herself? What if Ben was right? That she was nothing without him, just a washed-up ex-wife with no future and no place in the world? The doubts circled her like vultures, picking at every hope, every scrap of confidence she had left. In the darkest hours of the night, Emma wondered if things would ever get better. She thought about calling Megan, but it was too late, and she was too ashamed to explain everything that had happened. She thought about her parents back in Pennsylvania, their voices kind and encouraging, but she couldn't bear the idea of worrying them even more. She was determined to protect them from her pain, to pretend she was okay even as she was falling apart. She replayed her mother's old advice, the words that used to give her comfort. Sometimes you have to break to start again. Sometimes you have to lose everything to find out what you're really made of. Tonight, the words sounded hollow. All she felt was loss. The next morning, Emma awoke with a headache and swollen eyes. The city was gray, the rain still falling, the sounds of life outside her window feeling a million miles away. She sat on the edge of her bed, hands pressed to her stomach, and let herself breathe. Slowly, carefully, she remembered why she was fighting. It wasn't for Ben, or Jasmine, or anyone at that wretched gala. It was for her baby. It was for herself. She forced herself up, made tea, and ate a piece of toast, even though her stomach churned. She cleaned her apartment, focusing on simple tasks just to keep moving. Every small act was a rebellion against despair. Each step was proof that she was still here, still trying. She didn't know how she would rebuild her life. She didn't know how she would find the strength to face the world again. But as she looked out the rain-streaked window, Emma whispered a promise to her unborn child. "I don't know how we'll do this, but I swear, I won't give up on you. I won't give up on me, either. For now, that was enough. Tomorrow could wait. The rain had stopped by the time Emma Harper finally stepped outside again, but the world was still washed in gray. She moved through the city like a ghost, hood pulled low, shoulders hunched, hoping not to be seen. Yet beneath her exhaustion and the lingering sting of humiliation, something in Emma had started to shift. The collapse of the night before had left her empty. But sometimes, when you hit the bottom, you find a place to plant your feet. Emma took a subway uptown, letting herself be carried by habit and old memories. She ended up on the steps of the New York Public Library, a place that had once been her sanctuary. She sat in the shadow of stone lions, feeling the quiet weight of the building's history. It was here, almost 4 months earlier, that her entire life had turned upside down. She closed her eyes and let herself remember the chance encounter, the spark she never expected, and the secret she'd kept buried ever since. It had been a cold December afternoon. The yoga studio where she taught part-time was closed for renovations, so Emma stopped by the library to escape the wind and lose herself in a book. She loved wandering the marble halls, breathing in the scent of old paper and possibility. That day, as she reached for a novel on the highest shelf, a man's voice startled her. "Let me get that for you." His tone was warm, confident, a deep timbre that immediately caught her attention. Emma turned to see a man, tall and impeccably dressed in a simple charcoal suit, smiling at her with gentle eyes. His hair was streaked with silver, his face both striking and kind. He handed her the book with a nod. "Always happy to help someone who loves Fitzgerald." She laughed, surprised by the flutter in her chest. "Thank you. He's one of my favorites." They fell into easy conversation. His name was Alex Stanton. He was visiting from London. Business, he said, though he didn't say what kind. Emma guessed he was successful, but he didn't have the arrogance she'd come to expect from wealthy men. There was something genuine about his curiosity, the way he listened, the way he smiled. They walked the aisles, talking about books, travel, the best places to find coffee in New York. For the first time in months, Emma felt seen. Not as an ex-wife or a failure, but as herself. They met again by accident 2 days later, this time at a small cafe near the park. Alex bought her coffee, and they sat talking until the sun set behind the skyscrapers. He was easy to be around, his British wit both disarming and comforting. He never pushed, never pried. Emma found herself opening up in ways she hadn't with anyone since her marriage fell apart. Their friendship grew quickly. Over dinners and museum visits, Emma learned that Alex was not just wealthy. He was one of the world's most successful investors, the founder of a global tech conglomerate. His fortune was the kind that most people only read about in magazines, but he never flaunted it. In fact, he seemed to hide behind a wall of modesty, more interested in good conversation than in power or prestige. One snowy evening, Alex confided that his late wife had passed away from cancer years ago. He told Emma about the loneliness, the endless grind of running an empire, the longing for something real. Emma, in turn, shared her own scars, the pain of her divorce, the loss of her dreams, the fear that she'd never belong anywhere again. In that soft, vulnerable space, something blossomed between them. They spent one perfect night together, just one. It wasn't planned. There were no promises, no declarations. It was gentle and real and exactly what Emma needed. A reminder that she was still alive, still capable of love. The next morning, Alex left for London, their lives diverging with a sweet, bittersweet goodbye. Emma never expected to see him again. She certainly never expected what came next. A late period, the silent panic, the test turning positive. When she confirmed she was pregnant, her world spun off its axis. The timing was impossible, the situation overwhelming. But as the reality set in, Emma felt a strange sense of peace. This child was a miracle. Her miracle. She didn't tell Alex. She told herself it was to protect him. But the truth was, she was afraid. Afraid of what he'd say, of what it would mean, of letting someone else into her fragile new world. Instead, she built her life around the secret. She saved every penny, worked every shift she could, and planned for a future she'd face alone if she had to. She clung to the memory of Alex's kindness, the warmth in his eyes, the belief that she could be more than what Ben and the world had decided. Now, sitting on the library steps, Emma realized the enormity of what she carried. She wasn't just an ex-wife or a woman scorned. She was the mother of a billionaire's child, a child who would one day have the world at their feet, a child conceived in hope, not regret. Suddenly, the insults from Ben, the snide glances, the shame, all of it felt small. None of them knew the truth. None of them knew the power she held. Emma smiled, her hand resting protectively over her belly. For the first time in months, she didn't feel weak or lost. She felt strong, invincible. A plan began to form in her mind. She would not hide anymore. She would reclaim her life, her dignity, her future. This child was her reason. This secret was her power. And one day soon, the world would see the real Emma Harper, not just the woman Ben discarded, but a force they could never break. The city looked different to Emma Harper now. What had once seemed cold and daunting was suddenly alive with possibility. The knowledge that she was carrying the child of one of the world's most influential men had flipped a switch inside her. No more hiding. No more shame. Her heartbreak was real, but it was no longer her defining story. This was the start of a new Emma, a woman ready to fight for her future and her child's. The transformation wasn't instantaneous. The days that followed were hard, filled with doubt and exhaustion. But little by little, Emma began to piece herself back together. She started by making a list, small goals for each day. Get fresh air, eat something healthy, apply for 3 new jobs, call her parents just to hear their voices. Every time she crossed something off, she felt a flicker of hope. Her friend Megan became her fiercest cheerleader. One Saturday, Megan showed up at Emma's door with a duffel bag and a determined look. "You need a reboot," she declared, "and I know just the place." She dragged Emma to a tiny but chic salon in the West Village, where stylists greeted her like an old friend. Emma watched in the mirror as her hair was trimmed and shaped, her tired face transformed by subtle, skillful makeup. The stylist, a woman named Lila, chatted with Emma as she worked, asking questions about her life and dreams, never once mentioning Ben or the past. By the time Lila finished, Emma barely recognized the woman staring back. Her eyes seemed brighter, her smile more confident, her whole posture subtly changed. Megan took her shopping next, insisting Emma pick out a few new outfits that made her feel powerful, not just comfortable. "You don't need $1 million to look like $1 million bucks," Megan grinned, pressing a bold blazer and perfectly fitted jeans into her hands. "You just need to remember who you are." The makeover was more than skin deep. As Emma walked through the city in her new clothes, she felt a quiet strength blooming inside her. For the first time in months, people didn't see a woman who'd been left behind. They saw someone worth noticing. And more importantly, Emma saw it too. But it wasn't just about the outside. Emma knew she needed to rebuild her life from the ground up. She dusted off her resume and began applying for jobs outside of the yoga world. She took a short course in digital marketing online, working late into the night while her hand rested on her belly. She started networking, reaching out to former clients and new contacts with a confidence she'd never had before. The rejection emails hurt, but she refused to let them break her. Every no was just another step toward a yes. As weeks passed, small victories began to stack up. She landed a freelance gig managing social media for a small wellness startup. The pay wasn't much, but it was a start, and it gave her the chance to learn new skills from the safety of home. Her energy returned as she focused on the future, not the past. She found joy in small things again: a sunny walk in Central Park, a silly baby onesie in a shop window, the flutter of tiny kicks that reminded her of everything she was fighting for. Her relationship with her parents deepened too. She finally opened up to them about the pregnancy, expecting disappointment, but finding only love and support. "You were always meant to be a mom, honey," her dad told her over the phone. "We're so proud of you." Their faith in her became an anchor, something solid she could hold on to no matter what the world threw at her. Emma's transformation was about more than a makeover or a new job. It was about reclaiming her story, about refusing to let Ben's betrayal or anyone else's judgment define her. She began to walk with her head high, shoulders back, eyes clear. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was building a life worthy of her child. She joined a support group for single mothers in the city, and the women there became her tribe. They swapped stories of heartbreak and hope, traded babysitting tips and job leads, and celebrated every tiny victory together. Emma learned that strength wasn't about never breaking down. It was about getting back up, again and again, until standing tall felt natural. By the time her belly rounded out and the city's trees turned green with spring, Emma was a different woman. She had lost her fear. The things that once haunted her, Ben's voice, Jasmine's laughter, the judgment of strangers, were nothing compared to the quiet power growing inside her. She no longer saw herself as a victim. She was a survivor. She was a mother. She was a woman, reborn. One sunny morning, Emma stood on her apartment balcony and watched the city wake up below. The sky was streaked with gold, the air fresh and alive. She pressed her hands to her belly and whispered, "We're going to be okay. We're going to be more than okay." She felt her child kick in reply, a gentle, perfect promise. Emma Harper was ready to take on the world, ready to claim the future that belonged to her and her baby. She no longer needed anyone else's approval. She had become her own hero. The next time the world saw her, she would not be the woman they mocked or pitied. She would be the woman who came back stronger. And this time, she would write her own ending. Spring had turned the city electric, and with it, something in Emma Harper had come alive too. There was an undeniable thrill in the air, a sense that everything was about to change. For weeks, Emma had been quietly building her strength, growing into her new life, and preparing for a moment she knew would come. The day she would confront her past not as a victim, but as a woman transformed. That day came sooner than she expected. It started with a phone call from Megan. "You're not going to believe this, Em. The Kingston Foundation is hosting another gala, this time even bigger than before. Guess who's on the guest list?" Emma's stomach flipped. She hadn't seen Ben or Jasmine since that humiliating night months ago. She imagined their lives had only grown glossier, their circle tighter, their laughter louder. "Why are you telling me this?" Megan grinned through the phone. "Because you, my dear, are going to be there. Not as Ben's ex-wife, but as a woman who deserves to be seen, and not just seen, celebrated." Emma's first instinct was to say no, to shrink away from the spotlight she'd spent months avoiding. But something inside her, pride, courage, maybe even a little bit of righteous anger, said yes. This was her moment. She would not hide any longer. With Megan's help, Emma planned her return with meticulous detail. No detail was too small. She wore a stunning emerald green dress that hugged her new curves, her hair glossy and loose around her shoulders. Her makeup was elegant but bold, her jewelry simple but striking. She felt powerful, beautiful, and utterly herself. But it wasn't just the makeover that would stun the room. Emma had an ally, the world-famous billionaire, Alex Stanton, whose company was sponsoring the gala's biggest charitable initiative. Word had quietly spread among the elite that Alex would be bringing a very special guest that evening, a woman whose courage and grace had inspired him. Emma arrived at the gala on Alex's arm. The room buzzed the moment they walked in. Cameras flashed, guests craned their necks, and a ripple of whispers moved through the crowd. Ben and Jasmine stood at the center of the room, holding court as usual, but the moment they saw Emma, confident, radiant, unafraid, Ben's smug smile faltered. Jasmine's eyes widened, her grip on Ben's arm tightening. Alex was the perfect gentleman, guiding Emma through the crowd, introducing her to power players and philanthropists who looked at her with genuine respect. Emma felt nerves bubbling inside her, but she kept her head high, remembering every moment that had led her here. As the program began, the MC announced a surprise. Tonight's largest charitable endowment, a record-breaking $10 million, comes from the Stanton Harper Initiative, an organization devoted to supporting single mothers and empowering women in need. Please welcome Alex Stanton and Emma Harper to the stage. Applause thundered through the ballroom. Emma's heart pounded, but she walked to the stage with Alex, feeling a sense of destiny. She glanced at Ben and Jasmine, catching their stunned faces, and for the first time, she felt nothing but pity. Alex spoke first, praising Emma's strength, resilience, and vision for the foundation. Then, as the spotlight fell on Emma, she took a deep breath and addressed the crowd, not as Ben's ex, but as her own woman. "Tonight," she began, "I stand here not because my life has been easy, but because I refuse to let hardship define me. I am proud to be a single mother, proud of my journey and honored to use my experience to help other women find their voice and their power. No one should ever be made to feel small or invisible. We are all worthy of love, respect, and opportunity." The room was silent, wrapped with attention. Even Ben could not hide his awe. Then came the twist that no one saw coming. Alex turned to Emma, his eyes full of warmth. "Emma, I believe the world needs more people like you, people who turn adversity into hope. That's why I'm partnering with you, and why the Stanton Harper Initiative will change thousands of lives." The crowd erupted in applause, reporters scribbling furiously, cameras capturing every angle. Ben looked devastated, his position as the center of attention usurped by the woman he once mocked. Jasmine was pale, her confidence deflating in real time. As the evening wore on, people approached Emma to thank her, to share their own stories, to ask how they could help. Emma felt seen, valued, and finally free. She smiled for photos, shook hands with politicians and CEOs, and accepted congratulations from every corner of the room. But the most important moment came when Ben, clearly shaken, tried to approach her as the night wound down. He looked desperate, a shadow of the man who once stood so tall. "Emma, can we talk?" She held up her hand, her smile gentle but resolute. "There's nothing left to say, Ben. I wish you well, truly. But I have a new life now, one that doesn't include your approval or your pity." Ben's face crumpled, and Emma felt a wave of peace. This was her victory, not just over him, but over every fear, every doubt, every moment she thought she wasn't enough. As she left the gala, hand in hand with Alex, the city sparkling around her, Emma Harper knew she had written her own story, and this was only the beginning. The night air was fresh as Emma Harper stepped out of the gala, the sound of applause still echoing behind her. The city's lights seemed to shine just for her, washing the sidewalks in gold and silver. For the first time in a long time, Emma felt the weight of the past lift from her shoulders. Every humiliation, every heartbreak, every lonely night had led to this moment. Not a perfect ending, but a powerful new beginning. Alex squeezed her hand, his eyes bright with pride. "You were incredible up there, Emma. Truly. I've stood in front of world leaders and heads of state, but you inspired me in a way I'll never forget." Emma smiled, feeling a soft warmth spread through her chest. "Thank you, Alex, for everything, for believing in me when I couldn't even believe in myself." He pulled her gently aside, away from the photographers, and pressed a kiss to her forehead. "You never needed saving, Emma. You just needed a chance to be seen. Now the world sees you. And so do I." Those words, simple as they were, meant more to Emma than any headline or fortune ever could. She realized that her power had never depended on who stood at her side or what anyone else thought of her. It had always been there, waiting to be claimed. The months that followed were a whirlwind. The Stanton Harper Initiative became one of the most talked about charities in the city, raising millions for single mothers, battered women, and children in need. Emma threw herself into the work, using her experience and compassion to guide every decision. She was on the front page of magazines, invited to speak on panels, honored at events across the country. But she never let the spotlight change her. She still called her parents every Sunday, still met Megan for coffee and long walks in the park, still found quiet moments to sit by the window and watch the world go by. Her hand on her growing belly. Her child was born in early autumn, a beautiful, healthy baby girl, with Emma's eyes and Alex's smile. Emma named her Hope, a living promise of everything they had overcome together. Motherhood brought new challenges, sleepless nights, and moments of doubt, but it also brought a joy Emma had never known. She cherished every cuddle, every tiny laugh, every milestone. She was determined to be the mother she'd always dreamed of, fierce, loving, and unbreakable. And she never forgot the pain that had shaped her. She used her story as a beacon for others, visiting shelters, mentoring young women, speaking with honesty about failure, shame, and starting over. She told them what no one had told her. You are not weak because you loved someone who couldn't love you back. You are not ruined because you were left behind. You are not invisible. As word of Emma's journey spread, she began to receive letters, hundreds at first, then thousands. Women from all over the world poured out their hearts, sharing stories of betrayal, survival, and hope. Some were mothers struggling to feed their children, Others were professionals who had been passed over or mocked because of their gender. Some were still lost in heartbreak. Others had only just begun to find their way. Emma wrote back to as many as she could, offering advice, encouragement, and sometimes just a listening ear. She never pretended to have all the answers, but she made sure every woman knew one thing: she was never alone. One afternoon, as Emma watched Hope nap in the sunlight, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She thought of Ben, wherever he was, whatever became of his picture-perfect life, and felt no bitterness, only gratitude. His cruelty had taught her the most important lesson of all, that no one else could define her worth. Not a husband, not a stranger, not the world. Her warning to the world was simple, but powerful. Never underestimate a woman. Never assume you know her story just because you know her scars. Never mistake kindness for weakness or heartbreak for defeat. The women you mock today may be the ones who change the world tomorrow. The ex-wife you shame, the single mother you ignore, the dreamer you overlook, she could be your boss, your inspiration, your hero. Emma's voice became a rallying cry for women everywhere. Her speeches were quoted, her articles shared by millions. But the true legacy she left behind wasn't found in headlines or awards. It was in the women who stood up for themselves, who left toxic relationships, who started businesses, who found the courage to love again. It was in every child who grew up knowing that their mother was a warrior, not a victim. On the first anniversary of the gala, Emma returned to the Grand Regent Hotel, not as a guest, but as the keynote speaker. The same chandeliers glittered above, but this time, every light seemed to celebrate her victory. She looked out over the crowd and saw dozens of familiar faces, friends, allies, even former enemies who now admired her strength. She ended her speech with the words she wished someone had told her in her darkest hour. We are not defined by those who hurt us, but by how we rise after the fall. Every woman has the right to her own story, her own dreams, her own power. Don't let anyone take that from you. Not tonight, not ever. The applause was thunderous. Emma felt Hope's small hand clutching her finger, Alex's arm steady at her back, and Megan beaming from the front row. Her life had not gone according to plan, but it was more beautiful than she could have ever imagined. The world would remember the night Emma Harper reclaimed her story. And every woman watching would know she could do the same. So the story has ended, and our wonderful friends, are you still here with us right now? If you've stayed until this moment, I know something in Emma's journey must have touched your heart in some way. Maybe you've been hurt, maybe you felt invisible, or maybe you've carried a secret pain the world could never see. If this story shows us anything, it's that every ending can become a new beginning if we find the courage to believe in ourselves again. Remember, you are not ruined because you were left behind. You are not invisible. Sometimes what breaks us is actually what gives us the strength to rise even higher. As heterodox wisdom teaches, the wound is the place where the light enters you. So let's hold on to hope. Let's rise up for ourselves and for everyone who still feels unseen. If you felt inspired, please like, share, and subscribe, and drop a comment below about your own journey. We're all in this together.